welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your hosts, Buddy Sotello Esquire and Mike Leno. So we have two very special guests tonight, both relatively unexpected, but we're very proud to have them, and we can talk a lot about what we have in common, which is all pro wrestling and pro wrestling iron. My brother and cohort in crime, W.Michaels, better known as Owen Jackman, and Robert Butch Haugh, who is a former APW photographer. Oh, and we are being joined at this very second by our other esteemed guest. And that is
noted actor, casting director, films like Brush with Danger, The Wrestler, Heroes of Wrestling, a ton of other things. His book, When It Was Real. So get out there and order it if you not already have it. It belongs in everybody's library. Hey, Nikita.
Thank you, Dr. Mike. Can you guys hear me?
Absolutely. Yes. You sound great. You look great. You know, great to see you. Thank you for joining us. I haven't introduced you to my brother yet. This is W.Michaels, also known as Owen.
Hi, nice to meet
Hello,
you.
And
nice to meet you.
another part, my mystery-shrouded partner in crime is APW photographer and also owner and booker of the Wrestling for Charity Federation in the Bay Area, Robert Butch Haugh. So we've got a very wonderful panel tonight, and I'm really excited to talk about the many things we have in common too. Now, I will say I want to start off tonight by saying, well, we have SummerSlam obviously to talk about and everything that happened there, CM Punk and everything that happened there. But I just watched last night Heels episode 1 from
I've
Star.
been nagging you to watch, because Stephen, who's friends with Cody Runnels, of course, and was on the Green Lantern show. I don't know how many seasons it ran. I think 4 or 5 on CW.
I mean the Green Arrow show. The Green Arrow.
Green Arrow. Yeah, it's a great show. And tonight I've already watched half of. It's terrific. Last week was terrific.
No spoilers. No spoilers.
Yeah, it's cool because every week it has a new title. Tonight's is titled Dusty Finish, Nikita, which is funny. I do want to talk some history. Let me quickly just throw out some new books. There's a new book, a second book on the NWA world title, but this one is on Wahoo McDaniel, his record book. It is packed.
Your background thing is fuzzing it out. No. Hold it more towards. No.
That's weird. And I also got an autograph. They sent the Chris Jericho book. It has a couple of my photos in it. If you can't see it, Chris Jericho, the complete list of Chris Jericho. And it's available at Jericho 2.0. And it's assisted by Pete Fornatale and Alex Marvez, who I've known probably 40 years. Alex Marvez, if you don't know, on the AEW thing, he does the locker room interviews. But he started, trying to think of the name of his newsletter, early 90s, late 80s. And he was there, like Steve Beverly and all of these guys who went on to bigger and bigger. 3 Count was what Alex Marvez's sheet was called. There was a billion of them. I mean, Evan and Ginsburg, I hoping we're going to nag Evan to come back, start back with us in September. But Evan and I were part of, I don't know if you guys remember Jeff Osborne, but Jeff Osborne, who later went from wrestling to MMA promoting. I'll be brief here. He put out a newsletter, but instead of being on paper, we all phoned in and he put it on a cassette. It was called Cassette Wrestling News. So I would do my report on Japan and Mexico. Evan did his. And Nikita, you and I can talk about that later. Anyway, Russ, I'll throw it back to you.
All right. So, hey, I want to talk a little bit. I want to talk about Heels, but I also want to give a second to bring in Butch here and introduce him and tell everyone why he's worth paying attention to for Northern California wrestling. Butch not only was a great photographer in the early days of APW, and some of my favorite Buddy Sotello photographs are the ones that he took of me, but also running the Wrestling for Charity Federation. Butch, you want to talk a little bit about the history of WFC?
Sure. So just way back when, back under the learning tree of Roland Alexander and APW, I was ringside photographer, and I did a lot of marketing stuff under Roland and pretty much learned the ins and out, and even assisted in some of the booking meetings, and just got started. And at one point there was a falling out with people I won't name right now that had a disconnect with me in APW at the time. So I was doing some stuff in college, and we decided, well, why don't we do something? So we did something, and our very first couple of shows were ministry shows at De Anza College, which one of the very first shows featured some tag team named the Young Bucks, and it just kicked in from there and turned from just doing a couple of shows and started traveling all over the place from San Jose, where I'm located, to Santa Rosa, Porterville, and just traveling to different places to do different fundraiser events for all sorts of organizations, and then also hitting up festivals. Like we have done festivals on the Facebook campus, some high-tech stuff, private stuff that a lot of people don't even know. So
Paramount's Great America.
Yep, Great America, where
it was 98 degrees and the mat temperature was 110, and the guys didn't want to take any mat moves. They're like, keep everything aerial, because they said it hurt more to land on the mat and sit on it while it was, sizzling and burning you to death. It's like, just whatever we do it on the ropes and let's do it in the air, but let's not do anything on the mat. And it was pretty funny. I remember that was quite an experience that we had out there. But you had a great crowd. That was one of the top drawing crowds in.
What is that? It's like 7 years ago?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, no. We're talking, this is probably...
Before my kids.
Oh, gosh, this is probably 13, 14 years ago.
Yeah, that was before my kids. Yeah.
This was Bailey's first booking outside of her own promotion in front of a real crowd.
Yes.
But you were using a combination of talent. It wasn't all APW. You were using...
Oh, no, gosh, no. That's one of the things I strove for from the get-go. It was not just APW, BTW, UPW, PWI. We sourced talent from all over the place. That way we got different matches, which, that's what you're seeing on some of the big TV stuff now. You're seeing matches on AEW that you're not seeing on the indies because nobody's booking it, because everybody's favoring their local products or their local home promotion. And I was loyal to the APW guys, but you mixed it up with guys from all over the place, and then you bring in some outside talents like a Gangrel or Hurricane Helms, people like that come in there, give some veteran expertise. That's kind of what you got to do to get some of these. Hey,
Davina Rose was a homegrown product for us.
Yeah.
She started as Nikki. Her APW name was Nikki. Obviously, everybody knows her as Sarah Del Rey, Sarah D'Amato, who now is the awesome trainer of the females at NXT. But we don't know what's going on with NXT. That new guy Vince brought in, not Tony Khan, but the other Khan, who's unrelated to AEW's Khan. This guy's seemingly cleaning house on all levels, talent, backstage people, and he's already made a statement yesterday that NXT you'll be seeing some major changes, and everybody's dreading those in the next 3 weeks from the upper echelon promotion, where they basically were stealing name talent. Bryan Danielson, all the rest. Obviously, we're going to see him in AEW in just a couple of weeks.
CM Punk.
Yeah, and let me ask Nikita, let me ask our three guests what you felt, because me covering the biz in '66, that was one of the most emotional, longest periods. And hey, it forced Vince to react. He had to hot shot and break Becky and Brock Lesnar in. That was hot shotting. And then destroying the reputation of his female champion, Bianca Belair. Just really, that was mind-bogglingly stupid. Well, AEW can't seem. I mean, they're offering fans new stuff. So let me ask our three guests: did you watch the CM Punk thing? Because it went on 5-6 minutes before he could even speak. It was deafening. It was very emotional. I've never seen anything like it, really.
I didn't watch it, but I did see parts of the replay, and you could see the genuine emotion in that man's face. He was moved. It was unbelievable. Who would think? Who would really in this?
It's been gone. They've wanted this guy. They've chanted this guy's name, not just at WWE shows, but other shows, Chicago and other cities as well. They've waited and wanted this guy to come back for the last 7 years. I remember him riding cars around with him from the Red Roof Inns and around where Ring of Honor was happening, and then 2005 riding back and forth to Tampa Airport from the first WrestleCon. That's the High Spots one. And just a great guy. In fact, the match he was in, Abby, Dusty Rhodes, Kevin Sullivan, he was in this 8-man tag match, which was the main event. Mick Foley was in it. He's a real down-to-earth, true blue guy. I didn't see anybody. So let's ask our other guest, but I didn't see if his wife, I can't think of her name now, but she's a retired female WWE women's champ. She was there. I'm sure she had to have been the one that cried because he didn't cry. He looked like he was, I think he probably got that out of his system backstage before he came out. But Butch, what did you watch any of that? You know,
I did. You know, the ironic thing is I haven't watched much televised wrestling over the last year or two, to be honest. And I had to tune in knowing that Punk was likely showing up. It was got to be the greatest not kept secret in professional wrestling history that Punk was going to show up in Chicago on Rampage. And that was probably,
since Dusty Rhodes was the Midnight Rider.
Right.
That's maybe the second least.
And I'm going to say that was the most enthralling 20 minutes of pro wrestling I've seen in the last 20 years. I mean, who on earth would expect one person to be able to get such a pop for literally just sitting down cross-legged in the ring, shooting from the hip, taking shots at Vince without really taking the shots, shooting from the hip. But the biggest thing, in my opinion, was the fact that he was so damn friggin' happy in there. Happy to be at a place that didn't have a toxic environment where you can see the boys and girls are allowed to go out there, have some creative control with not just their characters, but what they do in the ring to be creative. And you know, that's what I think wrestling fans are craving. There's no organic stuff on TV right now. And that's what AEW is doing to an extent. These guys are allowed to go out there and do their thing. And that's what it was. It was pure emotion. It was raw. And that's what we need more of. I mean, we're not getting that with what we see on WWE right now. And obviously we can see Vince's reaction, what he had to do. Well, I'm going to go throw Brock out there and throw Becky Lynch out there, and we'll see if that helps him long term, but probably not.
No, it's like the hot shot bringing Goldberg and Cena in just to put over the younger guys. Quickly, I think people want to hear the words pro wrestling. They don't want to hear sports entertainment. We want to hear them call a referee, not an official. A hospital, an emergency center, not a medical facility. All these stupid words, and telling the commentators.
Don't you think that AEW is sort of embodying like that everyman perspective, and how people are sort of fed up with corporate America right now, and that kind of in their own lives they have these arbitrary rules, and they see the wrestlers in the WWE and how they're just being kowtowed to this sort of corporate Americaism, and then they see AEW and it seems like, wow, this is how we wish our workplace could be.
It goes deeper than that because this is a promoter who grew up as a fan. He loves the biz. He doesn't hate the biz. He doesn't call it bullshit term sports entertainment. And he wants to make the fans happy. He did not make them go through all these machinations, the fans last night, and trials and trips. No, he opened the show and he brings out CM Punk, which is what they wanted.
And he put over young talent in the process.
Yeah.
He put over Britt Baker and Darby Allin in the process.
Yeah, it's a well thought out. And the other thing is, I don't mean to pick on WWE. They have obviously amazing talent, but the script writers, the so-called creative, which is anything but, the only thing that's over is the Roman Reigns thing for the most part. And really, I mean, come on. And they killed off their women's champion, who was young, serving. And if they're going to bring all these people up from NXT and then just have it as a TV show with people you never heard of, the Leon Ruffs and stuff, who deserve better. I mean, he was let go. It's very frustrating. I think AEW is hitting it. And the other cool thing is it's not the same. You have to slog through. Everybody bitches about a 3-hour Raw, the same angles, the same matchups as the prior week and the week before that. AEW, other than Jericho, you won't see, you see the Young Bucks wrestle maybe every 3-4 weeks. And it's not the same stuff. They have so much talent. They bring up fresh people, and they're doing that on the Friday news show now at 10 p.m. Eastern time. And it's kind of amazing because it feels like Georgia Championship Wrestling, Nikita. I think if you remember that, it was you never knew what was going to happen. You could not predict it, unless you looked, for spoilers as to what the matches were going to be. But we didn't have that back then. So we had no idea that Abby, Bruiser Brody, Mark Lewin were going to just pop in. George Steele is the guy in the surprise box. Mongolian Stomper. We didn't know when these guys were going to just pop in out of nowhere. And AEW has such a huge, ever-growing roster. They can put up fresh matchups and unique stuff every week. And I think it's like a dream. And now with the relationship with New Japan and Impact and NWA, I mean, man, they got it kicking on all cylinders. And WWE feels like Bizarro land in their own bubble, and they're now going to have to play catch up.
Well, look what they did with the women's division. They had the Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker stole the show. I can't remember. I think that was 4 or 5 months ago now. That blew away anything WWE's done because they let those two girls go out there and go all in. It was the main event of the show, the highest rated program, and it was talked about for weeks. And I know WWE's done that with Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair in the past, but look what they just did this past weekend. Just killed it.
Yeah, Nikita, what are your thoughts of did you watch SummerSlam or get any of the results, and what were your
Hell no, I wouldn't watch SummerSlam. I don't watch anything. I go watch my old tapes.
Here's the results. Obviously tonight, and you can just watch it whenever you want to. That's the beauty of this streaming Peacock thing. The NXT would be the show to watch. I mean, almost every match is better than some of the stuff. Big E defeated Baron Corbin in the kickoff. Randy Orton and Riddle defeated AJ and Omos to take the Raw Tag Team Championships. Alexa Bliss, in a horrific match, defeated Eva Marie, who has no talent, doesn't belong.
People call that a negative 2 stars match.
Yeah, I mean the matches were so bad. I had a friend of mine on Facebook who's not a wrestling fan, does not follow wrestling, posted something that the Wi-Fi was down. They weren't able to sell. The cashless payments didn't work. The toilets were overflowing. No pyrotechnics. And again, this is from somebody that's not a wrestling fan. Just how it seems like everything that went right for AEW went wrong for WWE.
Okay, Damian Priest defeated Sheamus to become the new U.S. champ. Usos retained against Rey and Dominic. Becky Lynch, of course, in a matter of seconds, beat Bianca Belair to become the new SmackDown Women's Champ. Drew McIntyre defeated Jinder Mahal, Yeah. Charlotte Flair pinned Nikki, almost a superhero, Cross. I'm going to say her name, Cross, not stupid Nikki Ash, the way the instructor pronounced. And Rhea Ripley in the triple threat. Edge defeated Seth Rollins in the match of the night. Everybody's talking about Bobby Lashley in a ho-hum beat Goldberg to retain the WWE title, and of course Roman Reigns defeated John Cena. So I guess
about three good matches in 3 hours.
Yep.
It was
4 hours.
just
4 hours.
Rollins. But then Brock, of course, the storyline there is, who is Paul Heyman going to side with? He instructed Roman to slink out of the ring with him when Brock came in with the new hairdo and blah, blah, blah. They have not addressed what is going on with Sasha Banks. There have been all these crazy rumors that she and Bianca might have had COVID, and that's why they were off 2 house shows last weekend, although Charlotte blew off a house show, even though she's claiming she asked for permission to go with her dad and second Andrade against...
Sounds like there's more drama about that than there was about any matches in the darn ring, you know.
But, all those other promotions, MLW, NWA, Ring of Honor, of course, and you can watch Ring of Honor even on their website. I think the weekly show is free if you don't have it in your market. It airs on a whole bunch of, you've got all these different sports channels as part of DirecTV's package or Dishes or your cable company. You can watch it usually on the weekends, Friday and Saturday night. Terrific show every single week. Amazing talent we saw in APW. You want to talk about APW? Some of those Ring of Honor guys that come in, they're just out of this world. The New Japan show, if you have Roku, the New Japan US, I think is free on the Roku channel. So there's so much cool stuff that's cooler than the stuff we're getting from WWE, with the exception of NXT. And now we're getting threatened with the fact that show might be a mess. Very frustrating. Might be smart. And what kind of, well, maybe Nikita's watching other stuff. Like last night's, it had to end early, sadly, the We Love New York City concert. Before Paul Simon and Bruce Springsteen come out, that was what a mess that was. And Elvis Costello, because of the rain, it just
no one got hurt, thankfully.
I got almost as big a collection as Vince from the 70s and early 80s. So anytime I just go right and pick out each date what I want, and I'm happy as can be, man. They can do their 4-hour bullshits and it means nothings, and it's like, nah, you can't top what we used to see in the good old days, man.
I would watch 3-4 hours, and there is a compilation, Buddy Rogers Corner, and you look, one of those Buddy Rogers Corner, if you talk about legends, it was Rogers, who's one of the greatest of all time. Ernie Roth is the Grand Wizard, Ray Stevens, and who else was there? It was one other legend, just out of this world. But I mean, Blassie, Grand Wizard, Ray Stevens, and Buddy Rogers all together on one set, all interacting. It doesn't get better than that. I mean, that was the precursor, the predecessor to Piper's Pit, and they just kind of blew Buddy Rogers away.
The tough part, though, is when you say, it's, hey, you can go and watch the stuff from the 80s and all that stuff, which is wonderful. But for like Butch and myself, we have friends that are still wrestling at this time, or people that we knew, that we worked with. So we want things to work out for them. Do you remember Tom Castor, who's now a WWE ref? He hurt his shoulder, so he's been out. But he's the nicest
too. Remember Bukaki Bruce?
Yep.
Yes.
I was so happy when he got hired.
Right.
Sad Kirk White's ref didn't last more than a year or so there, but the APW guys, the Iron guys, they're still there.
Yeah, and so I still want the best for these folks because they are friends of mine. I don't want to kick them while they're down, but on the other hand, it's hard to root for a big monolithic corporation that were big contributors to Trump's campaign, and that doesn't exactly endear them to me, any more than anything else, and now that Vince just embodies so many things that people don't like, and really he did not give the fans what they wanted at SummerSlam.
Not at all.
And I think that he's paying the price because AEW is giving the fans what they want.
And look who's in AEW, our own Will Hobbs from APW, born and bred. And actually Shotzi Blackheart was a NorCal trainee and really finessed. She was always an amazing talent. We'd see her at
Mercedes.
Sparky Ballards, and Mercedes Martinez. We saw a little bit in Northern Cal, but also
she was in Wrestling for Charity, right? We had her you had her booked at a WFC.
She appeared several times. Yeah.
Yes.
But look at more of our talent: Thunder Rosa, La Rosa Negra, and Holly Dead, all NorCal trained and bred women. They've all moved together near Houston, where Thunder Rosa has her own promotion separate from the work she does, and that is an all-women's promotion. So more power to her. All these great talents, and a ton come from the Bay Area. The whole genesis of AEW is from the Los Angeles-based Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. I mean, from the ref Rick Knox, the Young Bucks, so almost all of it. That whole heart and soul, but of course then they added on all these other elements. But I mean, I used to see and shoot Kenny Omega ringside at a zillion PWG spectacular shows, and every one of them was spectacular, sort of like King of the Indies, those great matches and dream matches and things that we would see. So a lot of California is in AEW and even the good parts of NXT. I'm still thinking of Shotzi Blackheart as an NXT talent as opposed to they have her on the main roster, but they're not really doing much with her as much as her talent really requires and deserves.
But see, what you said earlier, if AEW is allowing them to go out and actually do their own stuff, okay, the finish, what's going to happen, fine, but you can go out there, that you're going to get a better product than somebody that's got to follow a script. It's like an actor trying to memorize the lines. You're not going to get acting if they have trouble. They're trying to remember what the hell you're saying next, or I could say next, so it's not going to flow. So if you're going to send somebody out there with, I got to remember this, I got to remember that, you ain't going to get a good match. It's going to be too much. What the hell do I have to do next so I don't screw up and get screamed at? It's going to look like shit.
It generally does.
Yeah, and it's overbooked in the wrong areas. To me, it's overbooked in the wrong areas and underbooked in the areas that matter, which is what goes on in the actual ring.
5 weeks in a row, one of the main storylines was a friggin' tomato fight between two tag teams on Monday Night Raw, and you wonder why people aren't watching.
Yeah, or the whole doll thing, you know, the whole doll thing. Nobody has been a fan of, and yet they try to shove it down your throat to say you'll like this. We'll eventually make you like this, and it's like, no, I'll turn the channel because there's, you know, especially because, you know, compared to 20 or 30 years ago, your options now are so many.
Yeah, there's a lot of places to go.
Yes, and there's even something. This brings me full circle back to Heels, which we watched last night.
Did you notice that the big LG Luke Gallows was in the brief locker room shot last week on episode 1 on Stars? It said debuts every Sunday on Stars, and at 6 or 9 o'clock, depending on where you are. And each week they're going to repeat first. They'll show an hour ahead the prior week's episode. But Luke Gallows was in. I've heard some other stuff. And in tonight's episode, you're going to see it's old TNA footage of Abyss and Rob Van Dam with the opposition. So they're talking about a territory war, which you guys saw. But Nikita, I urge you to watch it. If you're not watching this Heels scripted show, it's a love letter to wrestling. It's a drama thing on Stars. And we have some
criticisms.
There are some criticisms.
We have some criticisms we want to bring up about the show. And that is, one is, it's like a Hollywood idea of what an indie fed would look like, but nothing is really very grungy or disgusting like it was in all the indie feds I ever worked.
Well, I watched tonight's episode. I mean,
locker rooms that are immaculate.
Exactly.
Locker rooms that don't have cans of tobacco spit, like just lying around everywhere.
Tonight's episode, Heels number 2. In the 70s, my relatives were in a suburb, Calhoun, Georgia, and I went to some crummy indie wrestling there in like 74, 75, and saw a lot of actually great wrestling in these funky places. My memories of shooting at the Sportatorium, it almost was like an indoor county fair. You could smell, what are those cakes called that they put the powdered sugar on that they sell at county fairs?
Funnel cakes.
Funnel cakes. You could smell French fries, corn dogs. You know, the wrestlers hated it. They said it was really a dump, but it had so much atmosphere, a la the Phoenix Madison Square Garden, not the New York Madison Square Garden, but the funky Phoenix one that was leveled a number of years ago. Tonight's episode.
But the other thing is, boy, the lighting was way too nice. It was way too professional. And wow, very big crowds. The other thing that kind of bothered me was the misogyny. They kept keeping the valet out of the locker room. And I don't know, maybe that might have been the case in the 60s or 70s, but it's 2021.
It's the promotions I see all throughout the U.S. The valets are always in the locker room because they
and
nobody cares.
Yeah, nobody cares. And I think to me, the misogyny. I don't know. Again, I think it might have, maybe 30, 40 years ago that would have been a valid point. But boy, I've not seen that in any of the many places. And granted, it's Northern California. I've never seen it.
Yeah, no, even in the 80s, the late 80s, mid to late 80s, Missy, Dark Journey, Precious, they were all in the locker room. I always saw them back there.
Yeah, and they were treated all the talent, whether you were a wrestler or you were, all the
manager,
talent,
valet.
Everybody got access to the locker room.
It's kind of a subplot. It's kind of a subplot.
You go in the APW locker room, you see kids on their trikes going all the way around. So it's wives, kids. That really was never allowed in my day, 70s, 80s. And I'm sure Nikita has been all over the country. He's seen his share of stuff. They were never allowed there.
And then the other thing that kind of got me was I couldn't believe that an indie promoter was like telling his wife, I guess me, "Oh no, I don't want you to work." That kind of amazed me, and I hope that they'll show some of the sugar mamas, because there are plenty of sugar mamas in the indie world, guys that will latch on to women who will subsidize their career. So I thought that was kind of, but the acting was very good. I did like all the acting, and the plot was pretty good, but there were some things like my brother said was kind of Hollywoodizing and definitely glamorizing sport that isn't always so glamorous.
But if you told me 30 years ago or 20 years ago that there'd be a show, any regular show that would be about indie wrestling, that would be on a series on a major network, I would have been blown away. So that to me is something.
With the Rock show, even though that is what upsets me there is because I was there. I shot at Polynesian Pro Wrestling, particularly some of the Honolulu shows. That was the only place she promoted on the islands, and also in San Jose. And there were none of those guys. None of those WWF guys were ever on Leah's shows. Meaning Savage, Piper, Greg Valentine, Sarge, often Sika. Rocky was on them. That's the only accurate thing. But none of the rest of those guys. Flair. No, it was some New Japan guys on occasion. Fujinami in particular, once Choshu, Hoshino, and some of these other guys. And it was on occasion, Mark Lewin might bring in Sheik or Brody. Lewin a couple of times, who was a legend in Honolulu. And then it was just her funky guys like Farmer Boy Ipu, these no-name guys that were horrible in the ring that were Honolulu products. And Lars Anderson, too, who was an established, long-term legend. And it was none of that stuff. So that bothers me more because it's purporting to be the real Rock's life and fantasizing that his grandma was this great person. And you just look her up. You'll see her track record. She at times was not. She stiffed a lot of people, like Debbie Combs and Candy Devine on shows there in the islands, and then a TV taping in California. So, but it is still fun. I want to ask you very quickly, Russ, on a booking note. I was referring to this song last week, the B-52's Girl from Ipanema Goes to Greenland, that I used to play to drive him nuts when we were driving, again, from Red Roof Inns in Jersey and Philly to the venues for Joel Goodhart and Coraluzzo shows. Because I don't know how regular radio shows like Busted Open on Sirius XM can play music. So you're saying you got a warning that when you played...
they cut it out. They actually cut out that part of the show that had the music on it. And they cut out our song, the intro. Because even though that's public domain song, they cut that out too. So that's the beauty of the modern digital world.
Talk about the WWE
and it happened within like a minute and a half of me uploading it to YouTube. I mean, YouTube has everything that they have encoded, every song that they have encoded. So if you've got it,
you didn't even play it. I was playing it.
You were playing in the background, and they could hear it enough that they went and censored it out of the video. So
that was another song that I played to just only one time when Dominic DeNucci was driving. I put the
You'll
CD.
Have to sing it.
So, well, I can't do justice because those women are fabulous in that group. But anyway, back to the show.
That's the new world that we live in. That they,
it's like AEW has none of that. You'll see some WWE shirts, WWF Classic shirts, Randy Savage shirts. They don't go and make people take them off the way I've seen it every single time I've gone, whether it's house show or TV, particularly TV. If you're wearing a Bullet Club shirt at a WWF taping, oh no, they'll make you wear somebody you don't care, an Otis shirt that you have no desire or care to wear to cover it up. It's just it's kind of mind blowing that the fans are treated like morons and with great disrespect. But not in AEW. I think it all starts with Tony Khan. Loves what he's doing. I think the guy's in heaven, and he's trying to make it a good experience for his audience, and that's why they're growing. And WWE's ratings, I mean, the ratings have been the shits for Raw. Of SmackDown, much better booking, obviously the Roman Reigns storyline and more matches, less talking. That's been the problem with anybody that,
Nikita, what did you want to add? What did you want to add?
Tony Khan is doing what Ted Turner should have done. Only Ted Turner didn't give a shit, wasn't paying attention, and he let it run away. He let somebody else handle it. Where Tony Khan loves it, Ted Turner was just turning money over and wanted to rub shit in Vince's face. But if he had paid attention, boy, I think WWE would have been gone a long time ago.
Interesting.
It was particularly where Vince screwed over Ted and so on, and Ted had to get the time back in '85. That Black Saturday. I don't think any of us. Well, you guys were too young, but Nikita and I remember that Black Saturday. We're ready to.
I remember it.
turn on and see Georgia Championship, and there's some, the second incarnation of it at a bad time slot, and there's Vince's program, which is far better, more fun than the stuff we've seen out of him in many, many years.
Because he was trying then. Now, don't give a shit.
Always makes me wonder about Vince Russo. It's like, did he intentionally, was he that incompetent, or did Vince McMahon, get some kind of plan something ahead for him to go into WCW and ruin it? But I think that was a very good point. Ted Turner was such an absentee owner that had he had more, gotten involved like Tony Khan, things could have been a lot different.
Well, Ted was running these networks and business guy. I don't think he loved it. He appreciated the fact from about 77 on, with Gordon Soley at the helm, the Georgia Championship Wrestling really put WTBS on the map. It went to a legit superstation, which WGN out of Chicago later became too. But yeah, it wasn't this real love and growing up as a fan and everything. I mean, Ted appreciated it, but he was like far too busy to be able to put in the proper time that Tony Khan is doing it.
Well, and the Time Warner merger, being a disaster, also made that whole thing with TBS, because it was all intertwined in the Time Warner.
Well, the morons they brought in. I mean, I was there through the Jim Hurt era, because I was there from day one till the end of the magazine, the Newsstand magazine, as a writer, photographer. And that's why you see me, if you look at Flair Fujinami, that WCW versus New Japan, March 21st, 91 show, I'm there at ringside because I also had helped them with location shots, the film crew, like Tokyo Tower, Roppongi. Anybody wants to know what Roppongi is, because they've heard it from Ring of Honor, Roppongi Vice, but Roppongi is the Americanized district of Tokyo. They have the Planet Hollywoods and the Hard Rock Cafes with $50 hamburgers and other and this was 1990 and 91 when I was almost living over there. Anyway, you'll see me at ringside. I'm the only Gaijin foreigner, non-Japanese, shooting at ringside of that Tokyo Egg Dome show. And a lot of people don't know the Egg Dome is like, you can walk it very easily. It's like half a block from Korakuen Hall. It's all part of this amusement park complex with great stores. One of the first all wrestling stores I ever saw in 1990. So very, very cool. Yeah. So, but back to Tony Khan. I mean, he too shared that love of Onita and FMW and all that stuff I got to shoot over there. But these guys were just tape trading, the Kenny Omegas and John Moxley's and Tony Khan. I mean, Tony Khan, I've heard also tape traded, and it's really cool. That's what I love to see, and I think maybe Butch, all of you guys might agree. I love to see that in anybody involved in the business, people who grew up watching it, as opposed to going to a gym and picking up some steroid dude that never saw wrestling at all. Those aren't the people with passion. The people that grew up watching, loving it since they were little kids, they make the best wrestling people no matter what role you play.
Agreed. And we need to do a show about tape trading, because there's a lot of history within that. I mean, we're talking VHS, guys.
Wow.
Holy shit.
Well, even further, dated, because I was around Richard Dawson a lot. Richard Dawson, those guys, because I'm still best friends with his two sons, but he had one of the earliest, this is the Bob Crane stuff, one of the earliest Betamaxes in December of 73.
Wow.
And
okay.
So his Mark and I, because I was head and he was my VP for the Tolis Brothers fan club, I gave an award to John Tolis at a KCOP Saturday taping in February of 74, and he had it preserved, the whole show with Dick Lane and Jimmy Lennon Sr. as the announcer. So so that's the fun. And then I think most tape trading really began when most of the rest of the public could get the Betamaxes around 76, because that's kind of when I think the real birth of tape trading began. And then obviously
it
VHS
began, but it didn't get big until videotapes themselves, blank ones, were under like $10. If you remember, to start with, they were getting a blank videotape was a huge investment. And then, then people started mailing tapes out as promotions and things like that. And I had a friend of mine who worked at a video store, Ted, right? And he used to get boxes of just like screeners. And so I would tape over the little hole and I would turn those into tapes that I would record. wrestling on for my brother.
Before that, guys. So before that, Nikita may know. As early as '69, there were a bunch of us that were taping the audio on cassettes. We didn't have, obviously, any kind of visual tape thing. Tape the audio of shows.
Yeah.
So L.A. shows, the Blassie, Tolis, Monsell's Powder angle from '71 on cassette, only the audio, because the promoters were so stupid. They had $15 3/4-inch tapes, a lot of them, like Mike LaBelle and Roy Shire, and they would just, after the tapes ran in the, all the different cities, they just tape right over them at the next taping.
Yeah.
Yeah. I told my wife Victoria the other day, August 16th was when Strongbow turned into belts because White Wolf was able to be his partner with the broken neck from Batera. I said, I wish I had that, but I do have it on audio. She said, what do you mean you have it on audio? I said, well, I used to have a cassette recorder, and before video, I would record cassettes. And she was like, you were that crazy? I'm like, absolutely. Yeah. That's all we could get, and we grabbed it. That was perfect.
And now it's like the only history that exists. Like you guys, us NorCal guys might remember Rich Frisk was a good friend of mine, a long-time fan since he was a baby. Grew up in San Francisco, but he's a little bit older than me. So from when Roy started, basically in late '61, Roy Shire in San Francisco, he taped on reel-to-reel, all the audio, complete shows.
Wow.
And I have copies of those through 1976 when finally guys like Les P and some of the rest of them were starting to tape every weekly LA and San Francisco show on Beta, Super Beta and Beta, regular Beta. Etc. So at least for San Francisco, partially of LA, we have all of that stuff, and guys like Steve Yohe, who's a god of LA history, he handheld, stuff from 1961 on at the Olympic Auditorium in the Sports Arena in LA. Blassie versus Bobo, Blassie, the 2 matches with Dick the Bruiser, heel for the WWE World Title, and Carpentier Blassie, Carpentier Bruiser. This was in Los Angeles. I can't think of too many guys that were shooting handheld reel-to-reel prior to 1970. And that would be Mark Dawson, who shot all the Olympic Auditorium cards from about late 72 on, the Tolis, Ernie Ladd, great stuff.
Now, Dr. Mike, do you know who Rocky Raymond is? Out of Boston.
You're right. I forgot about him. He, like John Arizzi, from about 71 on, with no audio. Sadly, there's no audio. Taped Bruno dropping to Koloff, Pedro beating Koloff, Bruno beating Stan Stasiak, who was the interim between Morales to him. Rocky's got that. Arizzi had some of it later. He didn't get the Bruno dropping stuff. He did get Bruno beating Stasiak December 10th of 73.
Yes, but he didn't have the ending because he was changing tapes when the ending happened. So it's like, damn, we got everything but the pin. It's like shit. But it's gold. We'll take it.
What did he miss the finish of? I have some of that stuff.
Bruno and Stasiak.
Bruno and Stasiak.
Yeah, because I have his whole collection.
And what Nikita and I were talking earlier by email, those guys had aura. Putting aside AEW and just looking at a lot of the talent, a lot of them don't have that Bruiser Brody, Stan Hansen aura or the Blassie aura or Ernie Ladd. Many do, but the vast majority don't have this aura. Even Dick the Bruiser, all these
because a lot of the guys that you have now in the WWE, are big guys, muscled up dudes, but they don't necessarily look like tough guys. They look big, but they don't look like the kind of guys that would start a bar fight. Whereas, Stan Hansen looks like the kind of guy that would start a bar fight if you push him the wrong way. Harley Race, kind of guy that, you would think if you got in a bar fight with him, you'd be taking your life in your own hands.
When we talked last week about Midnight Express, I said Dennis Condrey looks more like a wrestler to me than any of the others because he looks like he'll beat your ass. But he's not buff, but he looks tough. That's the difference.
Yeah.
We had the exception. There were very few muscular guys in our day. Sailor Art Thomas, Neil Moskowitz, Billy Graham, Earl Maynard, Dory Dixon. There just were not, the norm was a guy like Bulldog Bob Brown who looked like a big slob, but he was a tough guy.
Crusher and the Bruiser,
Yeah, they were muscular. They were well buffed up.
But they were beer barrel guys. They were sides of beef wrestlers. Greg Valentine, you know, Bobby Eaton, you know, wasn't exactly, you know, a Greek statue, you know, Adrian Adonis, you know.
He's the greatest tag team wrestler of all time.
Dick Murdoch, you know, wasn't going to win any World Bodybuilding Federation.
No, but I'd rather watch him more than hardly anybody. Him and Ray Stevens, Dick Murdoch and Ray Stevens, at least from that 70s era, I'd rather watch their stuff. Or, you know, Dory Jr., Briscoe, Jack Briscoe. They didn't have, there was, you know, they were in shape.
Yeah, obviously. Pat Patterson wasn't, a chiseled god or anything like that. But, you know.
About that. Vince made people start to pay attention to that, where all of those guys, you know, just looked ridiculous. You know, I mean, I think we're all fans of Paul Orndorff, but you know, that era, that incoming Vince era, it was just I was surprised Piper was even able to show his talents, because Vince really craved that superstar Graham, Jesse Ventura look, which didn't always translate into actually good matches.
And Piper did fail in his first TV shot because they said the old man said he's just too small. They didn't even want to hear it.
You know, with a story there, and I got that both from Blassie, Albano, and Piper. Piper said that was, and the program, that cover, Jeff Walton, my boss, my media boss in L.A., who was shooting ringside for, who did our program, he sent for when Chavo debuted and when Piper debuted. Those were my shots on the Madison Square Garden cover. Piper with the bagpipes. So in the back before he went out, this was, I think, his 77 Madison Square Garden. It was just, all these promoters were sending Vince guys. Vern sent Billy Robinson, who had one match, just so they could have the feel of Madison Square Garden. Crockett sent Flair. We're talking 77, you know. But LaBelle sent, my boss, Mike LaBelle, sent Piper, or Chavo first and then Piper later. In the back, before Piper goes out, Albano and Blassie, who had watched the TV, they were getting our TV on the Spanish International Network of Piper, and they all said, you know, this guy's so young but such a great talker. They were allegedly jealous of him, so they stuffed a bunch of paper towels, toilet paper and towels into his bagpipes, and he'd get into the ring, and the bagpipes wouldn't play. And you might have been at MSG. I was not for that show, even though my photo on the cover filled up the full cover of the program, all the fans had. But Piper was just demoralized, didn't have the greatest match. And, yeah, the other thing was he was small in comparison, because we all used to call that the big man's territory in the 60s and 70s. All these monsters that they'd throw against Bruno and then Pedro and Backlund, you know, huge guys, the John Studds, whereas there were so many great territories, San Francisco and Memphis, where normal-sized guys that could just work the asses off. A guy like Bulldog Brower, who was kind of plotting, you know, later like we'd see in the Warlord or Barbarian. Not that they weren't huge stars, but, you know, whatever they did to get as big as they did.
But I have a question for you, and that is, how did you take the challenge of booking? Because you always did a really good job of booking, and people always thought your shows had a lot of good booking behind them. How did you, you know, do the dichotomy of booking the big guys versus the smaller folks and make sure that everyone felt that it was booked fairly?
Well, first and foremost, we looked at what we had available, what roster we could pick from. So we're looking for top heels and top baby faces, who can do this, who can do that, who can talk, and looking for matchups that actually work. Like, you know, Rick Luxury is a guy that could work anybody. You could throw him in there with anybody, but you're not going to book Larry Blackwell versus CM Punk. You know, to put it bluntly, if you're going to book Larry Blackwell, you're going to book him versus somebody smaller, where it's going to be a big guy, little guy match, or Dennis DeMarco, James Watkins. Those guys are 70s throwback guys. You can't book them as a big top monster like you could to a guy like you can now with J.R. Kratos or Drake Frost. Those guys look like big bullies that can beat up anybody. But some of those guys can't. So you got to think about that, because what's a fan going to believe when this guy walks out that looks like his next door neighbor? So does the guy have a gimmick? Drake Frost had the cowboy gimmick for the longest time. That was great. Even Jody Christopherson, when he was doing the country cowboy gimmick, worked for him when he was a young baby face. And then he evolved into the War Pig, which suited him better with the tobacco, and it was more of a Stan Hansen throwback heel type gimmick. But yeah, it's looking at pairing up who can work together. And you know, opening match is your second most important match on the show, and so many people forget about that, and they just like to throw oh, I'm just going to put these two guys in the opening match. It's a garbage match. No, actually, it's not, because that sets the pace for the rest of your show. So it's all balance, and you got to have your main event moments and have some surprises for the crowd that's not absolutely predictable. So if I'm going to put Dennis DeMarco and James Watkins together, those two guys are relatively both big guys. They can both work an old school match together. But if I throw somebody like Sheik Kanabati, who's a great lightweight guy, in there, you have an element of surprise in there that you didn't have outside of there. So just, you got to work with what you have, and we don't all have Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair on a card. I mean, this is the Indies, so you might bring in some superstars like, hate to throw his name out there, but everybody who's I'm talking about that's made a legacy of this in the Bay Area. You bring in a couple of ex-WWE stars. The fans come to see them. You've got an undercard of guys that know how to work, guys and girls like Davina Rose, that can work a crowd, and they work the friggin' crowd. It's not all about doing 6,000 moves. So you got to have guys that can work that crowd and adapt. That's key. You got to have guys that.
When the promoter you're talking about, because I shot all of his shows, AEW guys often save those cards, but he tried a couple times not bringing the 1 to 2 fly-ins. The Chris Masters, etc. guys. And with just the talent he had, when he didn't have a Davina Rose, now known as Bailey, when he had her or people like that, those shows drew poorly. It would be like half.
I'm kidding.
Because not all of them were well trained. Not all of them actually.
You can only see La Emperor so many times.
That's fine, but I'm talking about some of the other ones. That one guy,
Dash Riprock.
Dash Riprock, please. That was a Beverly Hillbillies Jethro book. Nikita doesn't know it. This guy had this name for the longest time, but
he was so bad.
Yeah.
Super nice guy, but I'm sorry.
And the Masked Marvel with Herman Munster. That was.
It was close. There's
a right there. We should have all of this panel back on to discuss like wrestlers on the Jack Benny Show, the Munsters, Nick Bach on the Monkeys.
Yeah.
Fred Blassie on Dick Van Dyke, yeah.
And also on the Dr. Demento show for many years with his
my wife, before she knew anything about me and wrestling, she used to talk about that, Dr. Demento. When I said,
I bite the songs.
Fred Blassie. She's like, yeah, I do know him. I said, oh, my God.
Those 4 songs of 4 EP that Johnny Legend produced of Fred. And then he and his sister, Lynn Margulies. A lot of people don't know Lynn Margulies, who was Kaufman's girlfriend, in between Elaine Boozler and some other comics. But she was an art student. She produced, as did Johnny. I think they worked together on Breakfast with Blassie, the Kaufman-Blassie one. And then there was another Andy Kaufman thing. Was in something like My Name is Andy Kaufman. It was underground.
I'm from Hollywood. Yeah. I'm Andy Kaufman, and I'm from Hollywood. And that was a primer to teach me how to become a manager in professional wrestling. That's like a how-to on how you become a heel manager in pro wrestling. One of the greatest videos ever made.
I want to ask you guys if anybody can find and get the clip of, it was one of the first times Andy Kaufman did intergender wrestling on Saturday Night Live, and the guy who came to the ring, Buddy Rogers. I've only seen a short clip, not the full clip, so if anybody, homework-wise, any of you 4 gents can find that.
Boy, I'd love to see that, too.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Most people regard far above Ric Flair. The matches were not predictable. Probably the greatest. He and Ray Stevens, the greatest performing wrestlers. Not hooker shooters, not the Scotch types, but Buddy Rogers. The stuff he did, and the patter. This guy was absolutely incredible.
So he's the father of the Intercontinental Championship, right? I mean, he was the first one that the WWE had, or WWE had.
That was Pat. He was the first Tri-WF champion. The Titan Capital Wrestling champion was Buddy Rogers.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
But look at Buddy Rogers, even when he was with Snuka in 1982 against Ray Stevens and Lou Albano. I don't know what his age was, probably late 60s. He still got out there for that Thanksgiving card and did it. And he was in the ring. He didn't stay on the apron. He was in the match. Snuka spent most of the match on the apron. It's like, that's impressive. That's a pro.
Andy Scott brought him down to pass the torch around 78 to Flair in the ring. And pass the figure 4 leg lock to him, which a number of guys like Johnny Powers use, Briscoe, of course.
Then we come full circle to Bill Goldberg with a 0-star match,
Yeah.
you know, at SummerSlam.
And getting paid millions of dollars.
Yeah, millions of dollars that the WWE says they can't use to keep a guy like Bray Wyatt. You think about all the money that they paid to Bill Goldberg to show up at SummerSlam last night and deliver an absolute piece of crap match versus what they could have taken that money for and given it to Bray Wyatt probably to keep him to stay, or Braun Strowman to keep him to stay. But they didn't, and now they're, you know, I think a lot of us on the outside are hoping that AEW succeeds here and teaches a lesson to the WWE on how they treat their talent and whether, you know, you should be putting stuff in plastic bags, garbage bags, for wrestlers that have been there for 30 years.
But it wasn't necessarily just the female wrestler. I can't think of her name. Who more power to her doing that all.
Mickey James. We've got the trash bag treatment. But I think people are in America. People are starting to root against the WWE. They see them as this heartless, mindless corporation that is all around them in so many other ways. Many of these people, unfortunately, have to work for that sort of thing. And I think that there's this feeling that AEW is sort of like the rebels. Yeah. They're the outlaws. They're the ones that, you know, are flying by different codes.
To let their talent. They don't tell their talent to hold back. They say,
that's it. That. And that I think is really drawing fans towards them at an amazing rate that Vince, I don't think, may be able to reverse. And maybe that's a good thing. Yeah, maybe that's a good thing. Anyway, gentlemen, we're just about out of time. Nikita, have you got anything that you'd like to promote while we've got a sec here?
Just this. When it was real, it's about the WWF in the 70s. It's not about me. It's about us, wrestling fans, and what it meant to us.
Terrific book.
Butch, why don't you tell us just a little bit about how people can get all the Wrestling for Charity? I know we're not doing any shows right now, but we will, and if so, I'll probably be involved somehow, I hope, at least even as a remote booker. So why don't you tell people, because there's still great videos up on the Wrestling for Charity YouTube site and so forth. So why don't you tell the fans a little bit about that?
WFCWrestling.com or find us on Facebook, Wrestling for Charity, pretty easy to find, or Google the YouTube page, Wrestling for Charity. There's nothing much new on there, but I know there's footage of a very young Bailey working a match that's got almost 1 million views up on there, and there's some other pretty good footage up there of Thunder Rosa and Shotzi Blackheart on there that keeps getting viewed, that's just sitting there.
Yeah, and we'll be doing shows in the future, right?
Oh, they're coming. We
haven't given up on it. It was a great idea.
COVID pretty much shut down all of our operations because of all of our events had to do with the school districts and festival organizations that pretty much were under complete lockdown until recently. So we're getting going soon. We're not going to rush out there just to say we're doing a show. Oh, let's do a COVID show that can limit us with 60 people. You have to wear your mask and be vaccinated. That just goes against me. If I'm going to do a show, I want a show that has capacity, that's done the right way with the production values. And I think Marcus at APW is taking the same road. He doesn't want to go until his venue and everybody is ready to go, because that's the last thing we need to do is go book stuff, have another lockdown come right as we're booking it. Let's get through this, and then let's go back to normal when we can. I mean, obviously places in Florida, they're full on already in Texas, but we're not really in that boat here in Northern California yet.
Wrestling is not worth dying for. That's for sure. That's for sure. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for another great show. We really appreciate you having on as guests, but we'll have you on when something big is coming down. So we'll make sure we'll promote it to the show. And thank you so much, Nikita, for joining us. And we'll see everybody else next week. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.